It started on a quiet street in Maplewood, Oregon, where mailboxes leaned the same way, and every lawn was cut to regulation height. You'd never think evil could hide behind vinyl siding and wind chimes. Yet every morning, while neighbors watered their roses or waved to the mailman, a boy sat under their feet, counting the seconds between the drips of a rusted pipe. That boy was me. My name's Ethan Reed, and these days I fix heating systems for a living. Funny, isn't it? I spend my days crawling into people's basements, tightening valves, and checking furnaces after spending 12 years trapped in one of my own. I was 6 when Patricia Reed, my father's new wife, decided I was too dangerous to live among normal people. She said the doctors agreed, though I never met one. The story went like this: I'd snapped after my parents' car accident hurt a teacher and couldn't control my blackouts. It sounded almost believable. She spoke with the calm authority of a nurse, always quoting fake medical terms like they were scripture. Ethan suffers from dissociative aggression, she'd say when anyone asked. He's safer in care. And the town believed her because she wore church clothes and smiled at bake sales. In truth, my care was a cement room below her kitchen. I remember the sound of her heels clicking across the floorboards above sharp, even like a metronome marking the years. The air smelled of rust and mildew. The only window had been painted black, but I could still tell the time by the dim shift of daylight. The north wall had 87 concrete blocks. I know because I counted them every morning, my own kind of prayer. Food came once a day through a slot in the door: cold beans, stale bread, sometimes soup that tasted of aluminum. She'd open the door just far enough to slide in the tray, never looking at me. "You're lucky I don't send you away," she'd say. "They'd strap you down in the hospital, shock your brain until you forgot your own name." After a while, I started thanking her. That's how deep her words went. She told the neighbors I was at a treatment center upstate. They sent sympathy cards. She'd toss them into the basement trash. On Sundays, I could hear the choir from St. Peter's drifting through the vents, mingled with Patricia's laughter upstairs. Once during a thunderstorm, I cried loud enough that old Mr. Walter next door came knocking. I heard his muffled voice, concerned, confused. Later that night, Patricia told me he was senile, that he'd imagined everything. The next week, the police came by to check on her safety. She served them coffee while I sat beneath the floorboards, holding my breath. It's strange what fear can do. It folds you in on yourself, until you mistake the darkness for safety. I used to press my palm to the cold wall and whisper, "Don't let me hurt anyone tonight." For years, I believed it. I believed I was a monster. Only later did I realize that monsters don't live in basements. They live upstairs, smiling through lace curtains, waving at the neighbors who never thought to listen. Sometimes I wonder if Patricia ever believed her own lies, or if she simply enjoyed watching me believe them. The walls of that basement weren't built from concrete alone. They were mortared with stories she repeated until they hardened into truth. "Dr. Melton says your condition is improving," she'd announce, setting down a tray of beans, as if it were a prescription. I never met Dr. Melton. I never even heard his voice. But she'd hold the phone to her ear at night, murmuring, "Yes, doctor. I'll keep him on the sedatives," before hanging up with a sigh loud enough for me to hear through the vents. For years, that voice, half hers, half imagination, became the closest thing I had to medical care. The folders came next. I remember her bringing down a stack of papers in a blue binder, hospital logos, diagnosis codes, signatures in looping cursive. "These prove I'm helping you," she said. "If anyone asks, you can show them." I didn't ask who anyone was. There was no one to show. Sometimes I'd trace my name on those documents, Ethan Reed, patient number 1198, and feel like I was touching a gravestone. She had rules about the light. No flashlights, no matches. Light triggers the episodes she'd worn. You know what happens when you see light? I didn't, but I believed her. I'd learned that disbelief only led to punishment, the slow withdrawal of food, or worse, her silence. That silence was unbearable. When she ignored me, the world disappeared. I'd rather be scolded, even struck, than erased. Outside the basement, life went on. I could hear the Sunday bells from St. Peter's, the laughter of children biking down Maple Street. Sometimes Reverend Collins visited. His baritone voice carried through the floorboards as he blessed Patricia for her selfless devotion. Once I caught the echo of her confession. "He's dangerous, Father, but I'm doing God's work." He told her she was an angel of mercy. I pressed my ear to the vent and listened to both of them lie in God's name. At night, I'd hear another voice, lower, smoother, a man's, Roger Mills. The way Patricia's tone changed when she spoke to him made my stomach twist. "Once the checks keep coming, we'll finally be free," she whispered. Free from what? From me, I assumed. They laughed softly, and I lay awake, tracing the cracks in the ceiling, wondering how freedom could sound so casual. One evening after a storm knocked out the power, she came down with a candle. Its flame painted her face gold, and for a second she looked almost human. She pinned one of my childhood photos to the wall, and on the back scrawled a single word, danger. Then she stared at it like she needed proof. I wanted to ask what she was trying to convince the world or herself, but I stayed quiet. I always did. By the time I was 15, fear had rewritten me. I flinched at sunlight when it snuck through the vent. The sound of footsteps above made my heart race. Patricia said I was improving, that the outside world was too fragile for someone like me. I didn't argue. Somewhere along the line, I stopped dreaming of escape. The basement had become my country, her lies, my language, and I her perfect believer. By the time I turned 18, the basement had begun to rot around me, the wood softer, the walls darker, the air thick with mildew, and something else I couldn't name. Maybe it was decay. Maybe it was truth. Patricia had grown quieter that year, more cautious. She stopped bringing the radio downstairs, stopped reading her fake reports from Dr. Melton. Her hands trembled when she set down the tray. She smiled less. Even her lies had started to wilt. One morning, she came down holding a piece of paper with an official seal on it. "You're of age now," she said. "It's time for a more permanent solution." Her voice was syrupy, practiced. "A facility in Texas has agreed to take you. It's peaceful there. You'll get the care you need." Texas. I'd never been farther than the rusted door at the top of the stairs. I asked when I'd be leaving. "Tuesday," she said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." She turned away before I could answer, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, fear. Not of me, but of something else entirely. That night I heard her talking upstairs. The phone cord stretched across the floorboards above my head, every word leaking through the vents like a confession. "Roger, the checks will keep coming as long as the account stays active. 18 changes the paperwork, that's all." Pause. Laughter. "The trust fund renews under guardian status if he's declared incompetent, Dr. Melton's forms are airtight. Trust fund." The words didn't belong in my world of dust and dripping pipes. They sounded expensive, dangerous. I pressed my ear closer. "His mother's estate will keep paying," she whispered. "He doesn't even know she left him anything." My mother. I hadn't said her name in years, but it rose in my throat now like a ghost. Rachel. For the first time, I wondered if the accident story was true. The next morning I asked, "Did my mom have money?" Patricia froze mid-step. "Who told you that?" "You did. Just now. You said something about checks." She slapped me so fast I didn't see her hand move. "You listen to my private calls." her face twisted into something feral. "You think you deserve what she left? You should have died with them." The world went silent after that, except for the sound of my own heartbeat. I touched my cheek and felt warmth, blood, or shame, I couldn't tell. Something inside me shifted a small click, like a lock giving way. A few days later, there was a knock upstairs. A man's voice, young, polite. "Deputy Miller, ma'am. Routine follow-up about a missing persons case from 2005. A child named Ethan Reed." I froze. Patricia's tone turned sugary. "Oh, that poor boy. He died in the accident with his parents. I was his stepmother." Papers shuffled. "Of course, ma'am," the deputy said, "just tying up old files." When the door closed, I heard her pacing, the sound of drawers opening, envelopes tearing. Later that night, she burned something in the kitchen sink. I smelled the smoke, bitter and chemical. That was when I knew whatever she feared was upstairs in those papers, and whatever I feared was about to change. The cracks in the cellar weren't just in the walls anymore. They were in her voice, her hands, her perfect story. And through them, for the first time, I could see a way out. The night I finally decided to leave didn't feel like courage. It felt like exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones until even fear starts to fade. The rain had been falling since dusk, heavy and steady, drumming against the roof like a countdown. Upstairs, Patricia was watching television, her laugh blending with the canned laughter from the sitcom. The sound made my skin crawl. I sat on the cold floor staring at the corner of the doorframe where the wood had swollen from years of leaks. That soft patch had always looked weak. That night it looked like salvation. I had nothing but a dull metal spoon from one of the old meal trays. I pressed it into the damp wood, scraping slowly. Flakes came off like paper. My fingers bled, the spoon bent, but I kept going, quiet, methodical, desperate. Each scrape was a prayer whispered to no one. The air smelled like mold and rust, the same way it had since I was 6. But it felt different now. It felt like ending. Around midnight, the TV clicked off. I heard Patricia's footsteps creak across the kitchen, the faucet running, then silence. Her sleeping pills would be working soon. I waited another hour, listening to the slow rhythm of her snoring. Then I pulled again, harder. The frame groaned, a sound so loud I froze. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. When nothing stirred above, I kept working until the hinge gave a low, broken sigh, and the door cracked open. The smell of her house hit me first. Lemon's perfume, and something bitter. I climbed the stairs, my legs trembling from disuse, gripping the wall to stay upright. The living room looked smaller than I'd imagined, cluttered with porcelain angels and family photos that didn't include me. The rain pounded the windows, muting the world outside. I hesitated at the back door, afraid of the darkness waiting beyond it. For years, she had told me the world was dangerous, that I'd hurt people if I ever got out. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she was afraid I'd find out who the real danger was. I stepped into the rain barefoot. The cold shocked my skin, but I didn't stop. I ran through the yard, over wet grass and broken branches into the woods behind the house. Each step hurt, each breath felt stolen. The storm swallowed me whole. By dawn, I reached the highway. Cars hissed past their headlights, blinding. I shielded my eyes, dizzy from the light I'd been denied for 12 years. I found an old jacket in a roadside dumpster, pulled it over my soaked clothes, and kept walking. The asphalt burned under my feet, even though it was cold. Freedom hurt in ways I didn't expect. That evening, I stumbled into a diner near the industrial park. The bell over the door jingled. A woman behind the counter. Her name tag said Grace looked up from the coffee pot. "You look like you've been through hell," she said. I didn't answer. She poured me a cup anyway. That was the first act of kindness I'd known in half my life. I didn't know it then, but Grace Turner would become the reason I learned to speak again, to look people in the eye, to believe that not every locked door hides a monster. Grace didn't ask questions at first. She just handed me a towel, a plate of scrambled eggs, and pointed toward the back sink. "If you're looking for work, I always need help washing dishes," she said. Her voice had that kind of quiet kindness that doesn't demand gratitude. I took the job, and for weeks I spoke in short sentences. "Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Thank you." My hands shook whenever someone raised their voice or dropped a plate. I didn't know how to belong to noise anymore. Grace never pushed. She'd leave small things on the counter for me. A sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a used paperback about second chances, a pair of work boots that almost fit. I started saving every dollar she paid me. At night, I'd sleep in the storage room behind the diner, wrapped in an old blanket that smelled like coffee and bleach. Freedom. I was learning came with its own kind of hunger. One afternoon, a delivery truck driver quit mid-shift, and Grace sent me to return the invoice to a law office across the street. I still remember the smell, fresh polish, old paper, the hum of air conditioning that made my skin prickle. While I was mopping near the reception desk, a man stepped out of a glass office. Gray suit, older, dignified in the way people look when they've spent decades talking in courtrooms. He stopped mid-stride. His coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the tile. "My God," he whispered. "You look just like her." I froze, mop in hand. "Sir Rachel Reed," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Your mother. She was my client." It felt like a lie at first, another story someone wanted me to believe. But then he said her name again, Rachel, and something deep inside me cracked open. No one had said that name aloud in 12 years. He guided me into his office. The nameplate on his desk read Charles Davenport, Senior, Partner. He pulled out a file so old it was yellow at the edges. "Your mother set up a trust before she died," he explained. $25 million for her son, Ethan Reed. But after the accident, your stepmother presented death certificates. She said you'd been killed too. He opened a folder and showed me the documents, my own death certificate, the seal of the state, the neat forged signatures, and a photo of a gravestone, Ethan Reed, beloved son, 1992-2005. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled on the edge of his desk. She told everyone I was dead. For 12 years, Davenport said quietly. She collected $18,000 a month from your memorial foundation. She claimed it was for charity in your name. I stared at the photo until the letters blurred. Beloved son. It was almost funny how carefully she'd buried me while I was still breathing. Mr. Davenport placed a hand on my shoulder. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said softly. "Our son passed before her. When I saw your face, I thought for a second he'd come back." He cleared his throat. "I'm calling an old friend at the Bureau, Detective Harper. We'll reopen your case." For the first time since I was 6, I felt something like air in my lungs. Not freedom, not yet, but the beginning of truth pushing its way through the rubble of lies. Detective Harper arrived 2 days after Mr. Davenport made the call. He didn't look like the lawman you see on TV. No swagger, no mirrored sunglasses, just a tired man in his 50s with kind eyes and a voice that sounded like gravel. When he shook my hand, he didn't squeeze or stare. He just said, "You've been through hell, son. Let's bring you home." Home. The word hit harder than I expected. I hadn't thought of Maplewood in years, not as a place that still existed. But that's where they took me back to the house on Birch Lane, with the white shutters and the wind chime that had haunted my dreams. Patricia was there when they arrived. She was loading suitcases into the trunk of Roger's car. When she saw the unmarked sedans pulling up, she froze. Roger dropped a box and papers scattered like frightened birds, bank statements, fake medical forms, a passport with my name, and a stranger's photo. The agents surrounded them in silence. I watched from the car as Patricia's face cracked open into something I'd never seen before, pure naked terror. For a second, she looked almost human. They found the basement exactly as I'd left it. Harper led me down the steps himself. The air was damp, stale heavy, with the ghosts of my own breath. My hand brushed the wall. My fingerprints were still there, faint tracks in the dust. The mattress, the sink, the old textbooks. It was all frozen in time like I'd never escaped. "We'll get samples," Harper said softly. "DNA prints, whatever we need." But he didn't need to say it. The room itself was the evidence. When they carried the boxes out, the news crews had already arrived. Maplewood had never seen so many flashing lights. Reporters shouted questions I couldn't answer. "Is it true you were missing for 12 years? Did your stepmother really fake your death?" Someone yelled, "The basement boy," and the name stuck before I could breathe it away. That night, every channel ran the story. Kidnapping and Maplewood local woman kept stepson hidden for over a decade. The whole town tuned in. People who'd smiled at Patricia in church, who'd eaten her pies at bake sales, now whispered about her in grocery aisles. Some called her a monster. Others said they should have known. But most just stayed quiet the same way they had before. Grace watched the news from her diner. When I came in the next morning, she didn't ask questions. She just wrapped her arms around me and said, "You made it out. That's what matters." For the first time, I didn't pull away. Later, Harper drove me to the station to give a statement. He treated me like a witness, not a victim. "Justice takes time," he said, "but it never forgets." I nodded, though part of me still didn't believe it. That evening I saw Mr. Walter on TV, older now, sitting on his porch with tears in his eyes. I told them I heard him crying. He said, voice trembling. Nobody listened. Watching him, I realized the story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who'd chosen silence. And as the cameras panned over that quiet little town, its manicured lawns and painted fences, Maplewood didn't look peaceful anymore. It looked guilty. The trial began 6 months later in the same courthouse where Patricia had once volunteered at charity events. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Every morning I'd walk past the reporters clustered outside their microphones like a field of metal flowers waiting for a headline. "The Basement Boy Testifies." It sounded surreal, like a bad movie title. But it was real, too real. Inside, Patricia sat at the defendant's table dressed in beige prison scrubs that made her look smaller than I remembered. Roger sat beside her, pale and sweating, avoiding my eyes. The fake Dr. Melton shuffled through his papers, his hands trembling. The three of them, my captors, my narrators reduced to silence under fluorescent lights. When the prosecutor called me to the stand, my knees nearly gave out. I looked at her once across the courtroom. Patricia didn't glare, didn't beg, didn't even blink. Her eyes were empty, like the basement walls, gray, unyielding, drained of all human color. I thought I'd feel rage or triumph. Instead, I felt something colder pity. They showed the evidence photos of the basement, the fake certificates, the burned bank statements. Harper testified about the day they arrested her Davenport, about the trust fund. When my name was read aloud as Ethan Reed, legal heir to the Rachel Reed estate, Patricia flinched for the first time. It was a small victory, but it felt earned. The verdict came after 9 days. Patricia 45 years for kidnapping, fraud, and aggravated abuse. Roger 12 years as an accomplice. Dr. Melton 10 years for falsifying medical records. The courtroom murmured as the judge read each sentence. I didn't move. Justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't come with fanfare. It just sits beside you, quiet and heavy. Afterward, Davenport met me in the hallway. "Your mother's trust has grown," he said, handing me a folder. "With interest and investments, it's now worth $32 million. The number didn't register. It might as well have been another person's life. "It's yours, Ethan. Every cent. But I knew money couldn't buy back 12 years of light. So I told him my plan, the Hidden Hope Foundation. A place for children who'd survived the things no one wanted to believe, gaslighting, captivity, silence." Davenport smiled, eyes damp. "Your mother would have been proud," he said. For the first time, I believed him. A week later, I went to St. Peter's. Reverend Collins looked older, his hair thinner, his faith shaken. When he saw me, he whispered, "I blessed a lie." I told him forgiveness wasn't mine to give. We sat in silence beneath the stained glass where sunlight fractured into colors I hadn't seen since childhood. At the final hearing, Patricia asked to speak. The judge allowed it. She turned toward me and said, "He doesn't know the truth about his father." Then she smiled, a thin, knowing curve that made my stomach twist. The bailiffs led her away before I could speak. That night I walked out of the courthouse into the pale afternoon light. The air smelled clean, new. The crowd cheered my name, but all I could hear was her voice echoing in my head. "He doesn't know the truth about his father." Justice had come, but peace would take longer. 3 years passed, though sometimes it still felt like I was counting the drops from that leaking pipe. Time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you how to live around the scars. I turned 30 last spring. The world outside no longer frightened me. It just felt enormous, like I was still learning how to stand inside it. I live now in a small apartment in downtown Portland. It's nothing fancy, just 2 rooms, creaky floors, and walls the color of warm bread, but it has windows. Real windows. 6 of them, to be exact. I keep them open all day, every day. I don't own curtains. I like watching the light move across the floor, how it changes from gold to white to amber as the day unfolds. After 12 years of darkness, sunlight feels like a conversation I never got to finish. I'm studying psychology now, working toward my degree. It feels strange sitting in classrooms, surrounded by people half my age, learning about manipulation and trauma from textbooks, when I once lived inside both. But maybe that's why I'm there, to understand what happened to me and how to help others crawl out of their own basements. The Hidden Hope Foundation is still running. We've helped 37 survivors in the last year alone. Every time a child steps into the shelter and sees a window for the first time, I see myself in their eyes, terrified, blinking, alive. Last month, I got a call from the Maplewood nursing home. Mr. Walter wanted to see me. I hadn't heard his name in years. When I arrived, he was sitting by the window, a blanket over his knees, sunlight spilling across his hands. He looked up and grinned. "You made it out, boy," he said. "Told him I wasn't crazy." I pulled something from my pocket, the rusted basement key, the one Harper had let me keep after the trial. I placed it in his hand. "You were the only one who listened," I told him. "I thought you should have this." His eyes filled with tears. "Then I guess we're both free," he whispered. That night I walked back through the city, the wind cool against my face. The streets glowed with neon, and car lights' reflections dancing across the puddles from an earlier rain. For once, the world didn't look dangerous. It looked open. Possible. Sometimes people still ask me what I learned from it all. My answer never changes. Monsters don't hide in basements, they hold the keys. Patricia's prison sentence doesn't erase what she took, but it taught me something important. Freedom isn't just a place. It's the decision to stop believing someone else's lies about who you are. When I got home, I opened every window and let the night air rush in. On my desk, My laptop blinked with a new email. No name, no address. Just one sentence. You don't know the real truth about your father. I stared at the screen as the wind lifted the curtains I didn't have, carrying the scent of rain and city light. For the first time in years, the darkness didn't scare me. It intrigued me. I smiled, faintly, whispered to the empty room. Then I guess the story isn't over yet. And as the morning sun crept through the glass, I let it cover me whole. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you watching from? Share your feelings and city in the comments below. Your words mean more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe to Domestic Tragedy for more powerful, true stories of survival, justice, and redemption. Every comment, every share helps bring light to hidden truths.